Hi all the students. In today's video we are going to study about the connection oriented and connectionless services that the layers provide. Now basically the layers in the network which we have discussed till now, these layers can offer you two types of services. One is your connection oriented service and another is the connectionless service. So first of all we will talk about the connection oriented service. So in the connection oriented service, what happens is that when a user wants to use a connection oriented service, then the user, obviously it is the user who would want to use the connection service, whether it is connection oriented or connectionless. So when a user wants to use the connection oriented services, there are three basic steps. User first of all establishes the connection. In any connection oriented service, first of all you need to establish a connection. Then the user uses the connection. Obviously when you have established the connection, the next step is to use it. So the user uses the connection, and when the connection has been used and the user has transmitted his data, then what would be the next step? The user would release the connection because it is now no longer needed and the data has been transferred. So these are the three simple steps that are required in a connection oriented service. User will first of all establish the connection, user would then use that connection, and then finally when that connection has been used and the data has been transferred, user would release the connection. Now this is quite similar to the telephone system, or you can say that the connection oriented service is modeled after the telephone system. Just like in a telephone system, in order to talk to someone, what you do? You first of all pick up your phone, then you dial the number. So picking up the phone is like establishing the connection. Then dialing the number and talking is like using the connection. And then you hang up the phone, this is like releasing the connection. So you can say that the connection oriented service is similar to a telephone system. Now in some cases when a connection is established, then the sender and receiver, both the sender and receiver negotiate on certain things. They negotiate on certain parameters. Now these parameters are your message size, that is the maximum size of the message that can be sent, this parameter could be your quality of service that is required, etc. So there are three possibilities when the sender and the receiver negotiate on the parameters. There are three possibilities. The first possibility is that one side makes a proposal. Obviously it is the one side that will make the proposal. So one side when makes the proposal, the other side can accept it. This is one possibility. Or the other side can reject it. Or the third possibility is that the other side can make a counter proposal. So either it is accepted by the other side if it likes it, either it is rejected by the other side if it does not like it, or if it is somewhere in the between, the other side makes a counter proposal. Now if I talk of the connectionless service, if I talk of the connectionless service, in a connectionless service, normally what happens is that each message carries the full destination. Each message carries your full destination address, because there is no dedicated line for the between the sender and the receiver. So there is no connection specifically set up for the sender and receiver. Therefore, each message carries the full destination address, so that it is easy to identify that this particular message is meant for which particular destination. So you can say that this is similar to the postal system. Like a postman carries various letters with the addresses on the envelopes. So by identifying the addresses, the postman identifies which letter is meant for which particular address. So this connectionless service is identical to the postal system. Since there is no dedicated connection between the sender and the receiver, so each message carries full destination address, so that there is no confusion regarding for which destination that message is meant. Okay, so another thing is that each message is routed through independent lines or different lines. So if there are more than one transmission line, so these different messages from the same sender which are meant for the same destination can be routed through different or independent lines. So that is why most of the cases there are sequencing of the messages. The sequencing of the messages helps to identify the sequence in which these messages should be arranged once all the messages have been received at the receiver's end. So each service basically can be characterized by the quality of services. So some services are reliable, some services are reliable, and some are unreliable. Basically, by reliable, I mean that you get an acknowledgement. You know whether your message has been received by the receiver or not. Just like you have an acknowledgement in the registered post. So you know, if you opt for the acknowledgement service, you know that once your post has been received by the receiver, you get an acknowledgement telling you that it has been received. And the unreliable one service does not have any acknowledgement. So whether your message has been received by the receiver or not, this you will not get to know. So this is the difference between a reliable service and an unreliable service. That in a reliable service you get the acknowledgement, so you get to know whether your message has been successfully received by the receiver or not. And in an unreliable service you do not get any acknowledgement, so that you don't have any idea whether your message was successfully received by the receiver or not. Now the problem with the acknowledgement process is that, okay, it is a reliable service, but the problem that you have with the acknowledgement service is that it introduces an overhead. Obviously there is an overhead, additional overhead of sending an acknowledgement back. Then and there are delays also, because first you receive a message, then you wait until you get an acknowledgement, and then you can send the next message. So obviously there are delays also in this kind of service, though it is reliable. So depending upon the kind of situation that you are in, you may choose for a reliable or an unreliable service. So basically, if I talk of a reliable service, so say for example, where you have to send digitized voice, or if you are in a video conference, in such cases where you are having a real-time conversation, unreliable service is more preferred, because you do not want any delays. It is okay for you to hear some background noises, but you cannot afford delays in case of real-time communication, whether it is a digitized voice communication or it is a video conferencing. So in such cases you can opt for unreliable services. But in cases of file transfer, where you want to be assured a delay of a few milliseconds is affordable, but accuracy is most important here, such as the file transfers. In that case you can choose for the reliable services. So depending upon the type of data you are sending, you can choose for an unreliable service, or you can choose for a reliable service. So unreliable here basically means something that is a service that is not providing you with any acknowledgement. That means your data transfer has not been acknowledged. This is what you mean by unreliable. So unreliable connectionless service is also known as a service which is unreliable, and connectionless is also known as your datagram service. So the messages that are sent in an unreliable connectionless service are also known as datagrams, and such a service is known as a datagram service. Now, acknowledgement can be provided for such datagram services. The datagram service, as I told you, is an unreliable connectionless services, but we can provide acknowledgement for the datagram service. So you can provide acknowledgement for datagram services. Acknowledgement can be provided for the datagram services, which it is like sending a registered letter. Like you send a registered letter and you get an acknowledgement. So it would be similar to like sending a registered letter, like in a postal service. So you send a registered letter, but you get an acknowledgement for it. So you can have acknowledged datagram services. So this is all about your connection oriented and connectionless services.